Hello everyone. The poem I would like to introduce to you today are two famous Korean poems, Hayoga and Dansimga. Hayoga and Dansimga are two poems introduced in the Cheonggu-yeonwon poetry collection, written in 1728 during the Joseon dynasty. Cheonggu-yeonwon is the oldest extant collection of Korean poetry, conducting 580 poems handed down since before the 18th century. It is currently on display at the National Hangul Museum and has been designated a national treasure. Hayoga and Dansimga are believed to have been written by Lee Bang-won and Jeong Mong-ju, respectively. Lee Bang-won, a supporter of the new dynasty, wrote the poem to persuade Jeong Mong-ju, a loyal subject who supported the current Joseon dynasty. Current Goryeo dynasty. The English translation of Hayoga is "How about?" Dansimga, written by Jeong Mong-ju as a response to Lee Bang-won's Hayoga, can be translated as "One True Love." Before reading the poem, I should note that those two poems were written before the invention of the modern Korean alphabet, when traditional Chinese was still spoken. Since I don't read Chinese, I can't read the original poem, but I'll read the literal English translations of each line. What about this? What about those? The back wall of Songhwangdong, what if it collapsed? Let's think the same way. What if we don't die? It is difficult to find rhyme in the poems. I've translated directly into English. However, if you look closely at the Chinese character, you'll see that they repeat themselves in different lines. An interpretation of Hayoga is "What about this? What about those?" Meaning, either way, it doesn't matter. The back wall of Songhwangdang, what if it collapsed? Meaning, it is a big deal if the kingdom changes. Let's think the same way. What if we don't die? Meaning, how about going with the flow and choosing the path that doesn't kill us? Next is the reply, Dansimga. My body dies and dies, die 100 times again. The white bone turned to dust. There may or may not be soul. Single-minded devotion to him, how could it disappear? The interpretation of Dansimga is "My body dies and dies, die 100 times again," meaning, even if I die 100 of times, the white bone turn to dust, there may or may not be soul, meaning, even if many time passes, then my bone turn to dust and my soul disappears. Single-minded devotion to him, how could it disappear? Meaning, how can loyalty to King change? My loyalty never changes. Hayoga and Danshimga were written during a time when the Goryeo dynasty was teetering on the brink of invasion and political influence from neighboring countries. Japan continued to invade the Korean Peninsula and China, having driven out the Mongols and established the Yuan dynasty, was attempting to exert influence over Goryeo. The incompetent king of the late Goryeo dynasty incurred the resentment of the military. Therefore, Yi Bangwon, who aspired to establish a new kingdom and become a king, invited Jeong Mong-ju, a capable Goryeo officer, to join him. However, Jeong Mong-ju, a fiercely loyal subject, refused to yield to the Goryeo king. As a result, Yi Bangwon sent an assassin to kill Jeong Mong-ju. Actually, the authentically of those two poems is different to determine, because this is because they were first published 3 or 4 centuries later. Officially, the oldest poetry collection in Korea date from the 17th or 18th centuries, and some studies argue that Hayoga and Danshimga are fictional works honoring Jeong Mong-ju, a loyal subject. However, these 2 poems are taught in Korean high school curriculums and are among the most famous of the ancient poems, so I wanted to introduce them to you. Do you guys have any questions?